So it's my pleasure to be here tonight. I think it's probably about a year since the last time I was here. So as is the case with M&Ms, the congregation changes on a fairly regular basis. And I think I've been coming here now on and off for about 6-7 years, and I've seen many people, but it's so nice to see so many people here tonight. I was saying earlier on, the first time I came here, we were 5 in the congregation, and that was including me preaching. So this is huge success. And also, I mean, the fact that so many of you have been keeping this community going over the last couple of months, I think is really of God. And I think I hope you've been strengthened and encouraged in this time. And then we come to our readings for today, these readings for Christ the King Sunday. And in the version of Psalm 46 that I looked at this morning, there's a phrase that they use I think in the version we read tonight, it was swords of fire. And in the version I read this morning, it was chariots of fire in Psalm 46. And I wonder how many of you have ever seen the film Chariots of Fire? Yeah, some good Presbyterians here must have seen it at some point. Because Chariots of Fire is about a Scottish athlete, and we all know Scottish people are the best people in the world. And so this Chariots of Fire is a really compelling tale of 2 athletes who are due to run for Great Britain in the 1924 Olympics in Paris. And both seek to get a gold medal. But each has their own motives. One of the characters, Harold Abrams, is a Jew and a Cambridge man who strives to overcome anti-Semitism by proving his worth. Eric Liddell is a Scottish Christian bound for China as a missionary. But he also wants to glorify God by using his God-given speed to the best of his ability. And at the 1924 Olympics, Liddell discovers that the heats for his race are on a Sunday. And his faith convicts him that he cannot run on a Sunday, God's designated day of rest, and doesn't run, seemingly ending his aspirations of a gold medal. Now, I would be spoiling it for you if you haven't seen the film, if I tell you what happens next. I can tell you Eric Liddell ended up in China. He's actually a very, very interesting man, and it's worth reading about his life. But ultimately, in this particular situation of the Olympics, faith is rewarded. Putting Christ first and aspirations of earthly glory second pays off. And it's an amazing witness to Christ as King. And I use this not just because it's a great film with a great story, but because today is Christ the King Sunday. Now, those of you who have started to become familiar with the Anglican way of doing church will know that the church year doesn't run the same way as our calendar year, our January to February year. The church year is built around the major moments of Christian faith: the birth, death, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus. Christ the King Sunday marks the end of the church year. So it's the church's version of New Year's Eve. That's what we have today. It's the day when we remember that Christ is our King, and he will return one day to claim his kingdom here on earth. And what's also quite interesting is it's not that ancient a festival in the Christian calendar. It was only established in 1925. It was established at a time when Europe was in chaos. Inflation was rampant and colonialism was at its worst. The seeds of evil that would eventually grow into the Holocaust and World War II were being planted. And within Catholicism, Pope Pius XI established the festival of Christ the King to declare that Jesus Christ is King above all other earthly claims of greatness. And other churches, including the Anglican Church, followed suit. And I really think that today we need to be reminded that Christ is actually King. Our world news will tell us, whenever we switch it on, that many, many things are out of control. Our national news will tell us that many things are out of control. If you've been following the UK politics, the French politics, the Hungarian politics, you might well be wondering who is in control. But even further than that, we have continuing wars, famine, genocide, the rise in populism and the related rise in racism and othering. We face as much challenges in Europe today and the wider world as there were in 1924. And as we face the end of this year, both as a church, but also as we come to the end of the calendar year and the start of 2020, some of us may face it with fear. Others may face it with doubts about the future. But in the midst of it all, we are reminded today that God is there. Psalm 46, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, even though the earth gives way. In a world out of control, there is one voice that rings clear, and we have the choice whether or not to listen to that heavenly voice of glory or continue to pursue our own attempts at earthly glory. In our reading from Colossians, that great Christological hymn, we are treated to what I think could be described as Jesus' CV. Paul lists the major achievements of Jesus: creator, unifier, reconciler, leader. Paul declares the preeminence of Christ in all things, visible and invisible, to clear away any confusion that everything comes from Jesus. From creation to the redemption of souls, Christ is Lord of it all. And that's the awe-inspiring mystery of the God-man, Jesus Christ. He threw stars into the sky at creation, yet he had his hands driven through with nails so that we could be reconciled to him. As Jesus hung on that cross, by those nails, his kingship was mocked. If you are the King of the Jews, save yourself. How do we imagine a king? Well, I think in fairy stories and on TV and in films, we often see them as sitting on their thrones with their fabulous robes, their scepters, their shiny crowns, and servants running around. We see them with much power and authority. They control armies, governments, and hold the very life of the people in their hands. And of course, then we have Jesus. No throne, no beautiful robes, no scepter, no shiny golden crown. Instead, we have thorns, we have spears, we have vinegar. I think often, though, that the type of kingly saviour that the world wants is one a little bit more like Superman, faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound, able to say, "This is fixed." But Jesus, dying on a cross, shatters our image of sovereignty, our notions of a mighty king. Power, riches, wisdom, strength, honour, glory, and blessing don't seem very obvious on the cross. Yet the cross is the very heart of the revelation of Jesus. The cross is the very essence of our understanding of God. The cross is the sign of victory over sin, death, and the power of evil. It doesn't look like it. And it didn't look like it to the people who witnessed the crucifixion that day. And it doesn't look like it because as Jesus hung there in agony, he was being mocked. He saved others, so let him save himself, they said. They accused him of being weak. In Luke, in our reading from Luke, the people don't just mock, some do, and others simply stand there and watch. The leaders scoff, the soldiers mock, and the people stand still. And in their own ways, they are all saying the same thing: save yourself. And this is basically the same thing that the devil did when he was tempting Jesus in the desert. Save yourself. Show us some of your power and avoid the pain and suffering of the cross. Give the world a sign of your power and give them the happy ending that they're all looking for. But Jesus didn't do that. What Jesus did was demonstrated something else. What Jesus demonstrated was not weakness. It wasn't weakness to not save himself, but instead was an incredible act of powerful love. Jesus emptied himself and all that he had for his subjects. He gave it all away for you and for me. On that cross, he chose us. While he was being mocked, he chose us. One of the criminals that hung beside Jesus recognized what was happening. And the request that he made to Jesus was an act of great faith. He confessed his own guilt and knew that he was getting what he deserved. But he also knew that Jesus had done nothing wrong. And then he just seems to get it. He says that this blameless Jesus will rule as a king. He understands that this dying king can indeed offer something for him. And he says, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus does remember him. When people are shuffling for power, prestige, and wealth, Jesus reigns. He's the only person who can rid the world of plagues of terrorism, poverty, crime, and disease. If we let Jesus be our king, we don't have to be kings or queens. We don't have to rule our world. We don't have to compete for earthly glory. We don't have to let things such as money or fame rule our lives. These things cannot make our life worth living. Only Jesus can make our life worth living. Jesus gives us our greatest freedom, the freedom from death. The freedom gives us freedom to live. And in return, we are called to serve until Christ returns to claim his earthly kingdom. That's what Eric Liddell believed from the film. He knew his life was about serving Christ, and he could not do what was not a service to God, but rather a disservice. If he were to run, it would be on God's terms, not his. The purpose of our Christian lives is based on our faith in a God who is eternally past, present, and future. It starts here in the present for each one of us. Each of us must encounter and experience the presence of God in our own lives on a daily basis. He continually reaches into our lives and transforms us. He gives us a future to look forward to. We need to look forward to the royal inheritance. We need to begin practicing for the perfected life that will be ours one day. And we need to start acting like the children of a king, because that's who we are. Our understanding of who Jesus is determines our eternal destiny after death. Of all the pursuits in this life, the knowledge of who Jesus is will be the greatest. To know Jesus is to know the security of purpose and the assurance of peace. Jesus is both Lord and Saviour and has allowed us to know him personally like never before. We are the children of a king. We are princes and princesses. Do we act like it? When we witness Christ's return, will he know us by our work, by our faith, being those princes and princesses? Jesus made us both to be involved in a kingdom here on earth and a kingdom in the future. The word kingdom refers to our body of believers, and Christ is the king of that kingdom. Everything will change when Jesus comes back. Evil will be shut down, order will be restored, and justice will reign, and it will be a joyous occasion. But until then, we have to make sure that we are living as if we are looking at the horizon of God's kingdom here on earth. God's reign is the power that keeps our world turning, the rain falling and the seasons returning. It's an expression of God's faithful, everlasting love. And it's the love that he has for us, this God-man, Jesus, as our King. We celebrate Christ the King Sunday because we know that as we go into Advent, we will see everything but a king. We will see a child, a baby, seen as one of the most weakest things. We will see people hunt him down and his family. We will see in time that crucifixion and that resurrection and that ascension. So tonight we have the opportunity to celebrate that Christ is the King, that he's a king that doesn't need to have the power of armies, the power of economies, the power of influence, but instead he's the king that has the power of love, the power of choice, the power that chose each one of us here. No matter what comes against us in this life, no matter if all of the power of pain and chaos of the universe seems to overtake us all at once, no matter if we can't control one single thing or fix one single thing in our lives, the worst will and is over. The healing has begun because Christ is the King who died and was resurrected and now sits as a king on his heavenly throne. Amen.